afternoon and welcome to the Lakeland Stadium, home of the Cumbria Kart Racing Club, here in Rowrah in Cumbria for round 3 of the 2017 FAB-Racing British Mini Bike Championships. We're underway with the second block of qualifying, which will take us through lunch and then ahead of the first round of races. Remembering that we have 3 races in all of 10 categories through the weekend, and each race will be worth championship points that count towards the 2017 season. We've had the opening 2 rounds of the campaign so far. Round number 1 that took place in Wales, and round 2 at Red Lodge last time out at the back end of last month. And it's the third month and a third different round of this 2017 season. So we're out on the circuit at the moment for second qualifying, and obviously the biggest factor in qualifying, those trackside will already be well aware, but those listening at home won't be quite so aware. The conditions are extremely damp here at Rowrah, so we were doused in a big rain shower, quite impressive rain shower actually, earlier on here today in Cumbria, and that's had a huge impact in terms of the timings, and in fact gaps between the riders in each of the sessions so far have been pretty sizable as a result of those weather conditions that have certainly seen a larger spread in the riders and those timings. It also has an impact on the value of each of the 2 qualifying sessions, bearing in mind that it's the best time over 2 sessions that decides the grid position, and that grid position then carries on through the 3 race sessions in each of those categories. So the riders looking for the best possible grid position for those races, but bearing in mind that it's the combined fastest time. If they do find themselves on track at a wetter interval, then they will end up with a slower time in that session, and so to some extent the first session times in some categories may end up being significantly faster than their times in Q2, and the reverse is also possible. Those who hit one of the big rain showers during qualifying 1 can expect to go quicker in Q2. We've just had the AC40 rookies out for their second qualifying session. Harrison Crosby topped them ahead of Jamie Woodcock and Luca Hopkins. They were then 3 seconds a lap faster than the rest of the pack. Alfie Davidson coming in 4th and Keaton Payne in 5th position in that second qualifying session. But in first qualifying, the top 10 all managed to go faster than that 1 minute 11.2 which Harrison Crosby set to top Q2. So the vast majority of the riders there are going to in fact I would go as far as to say probably all of the riders, without looking in too much detail, will take the times forward from their first qualifying session when the track was in slightly better condition than it is now, having been doused, as I said, by that rain shower. The rain seems to have cost the riders about as much as 20 seconds a lap in some cases. That's the extent to which the rain has come down, and obviously we're on a circuit that's used permanently by karts that lay down plenty of rubber on what would be the normal racing line, so the riders having to deviate around that to try and find grip, perhaps on the outside line, away from where the karts would normally run in dry conditions. And as well as obviously the lack of adhesion that's already caught out riders, particularly during that rain shower when the rain was first coming down and the wet weather flags were out and riders were going down left, right and centre. Low speed slide offs, so the vast majority were, but plenty of riders making their way back to the pits after small minor incidents on the circuit, just sliding off, particularly around some of the chicanes and those slower speed corners where they were taking it on the inside line and just losing the back end and sliding off. Thankfully on each occasion, as far as we could tell up here in our commentary position, the riders all able to get back up to their feet and continue on. So as I said, in the AC40 rookies, which was the first Q2 session out here today, it's Harrison Crosby who will find himself on pole position and with a 2.5 second advantage over his nearest rival. Crosby, the championship leader in the AC40 rookies category, 4 points clear of Jamie Woodcock, who won 2 of the opening 3 races at round number 1 in Llandow. So Harrison Crosby has come on strong since then, with 3 race victories at round 2 in Red Lodge last time out, and he is the championship leader by a 4-point margin. And it's a 2-rider battle at the top of the standings at the moment. Orlando Phillips with a non-scoring second race last time out, and that dropped him back to 3rd. So the wind has started to pick up here as well now, which poses an additional challenge to the riders. We're onto the circuit for the senior mini motos, which is the second of 3 Q2 sessions before we go away to lunch. Brandon Payne is the current fastest in this Q2 session with a 2.5 second advantage at the moment. And Payne also topped Q1, but as I said, big differences between first qualifying and second qualifying, particularly for the senior mini-motos who came out and were setting times in the 57s and are now about 7 seconds a lap slower than they were earlier on this morning when conditions, well, the day started off mildly damp, I would say, but now the track is well and truly soaked, and it will take quite some time for this to dry off because for those of you at home, it is extremely overcast here in Cumbria this afternoon, and so with no sun shining through to clear up conditions, and a dark and damp at the moment day and afternoon. So the senior mini motos are on the circuit at the moment. The current championship leader there is Will Howarth. As I said previously then, the likelihood in this second qualifying session for the senior mini-motos is that none of the riders will be able to improve on their personal best from this morning, in which case it will be Brandon Payne who will sit on pole position, having topped the time charts with a 57.3. Kieran Grigger in second place this morning, and Justin Bainbridge in third. And Bainbridge is again in third in this second qualifying session, but at the moment, as he just actually crosses the line in front of our home straight commentary position and improves up to second position in this afternoon's second qualifying session. The riders are certainly getting faster as we go through this second qualifying, but not enough by any means to try and improve on their times from earlier on today. So the Q1 times are likely to go forward for all of these riders, 16 of them on the time charts this morning. That's bad news for Matt Birkin, who's up in 5th position at the moment in this second qualifying session, but didn't appear with a set time in Q1. At the moment, his 106.3 would put him down in 15th position, so right towards the back of the grid, and that should provide some entertainment come race time as he tries to work his way through. Unless he can get to the 103s area, then he won't be able to move out of that position. As I said, on the results from Q1, he's showing as not having completed any laps. So unless that's an error, then Matt Birkin is really up against it here with only a Q2 time in wet conditions to determine his position on the grid. Brandon Payne then at the moment fastest in Q2 with a 103.4. Just over a second ahead of Mark Payne in second, and Justin Bainbridge over half a second further back in third. There's a group of riders running pretty similar pace at the moment, from second down to fifth. Matt Birkin and Kieran Grigger both setting new personal bests on that previous lap. They've eased off the pace this lap around though, as it's Brandon Payne who leads the way in Q2, as he did in first qualifying with that time that looks set to put him on pole position. There's no way that the riders are going to find 6 seconds a lap, even though the conditions are steadily drying out, I would say. There are some pools of water still out and around the circuit. Avoiding those is the first key, and the riders are also being very tentative about the curbs, just trying to avoid picking up any of the slippery portions of the circuit. Checkered flag already appearing for Justin Bainbridge and William Birkin then at the end of this second qualifying session in the senior mini motos. Mark Payne improves with a new personal best of a 104.4, but as I said, the riders having set much faster times in vastly better conditions in qualifying one earlier on this morning, with Brandon Payne topping the time charts overall with a 57.3. Kieran Grigger set to start in second place. Justin Bainbridge set to start in third. Mark Payne will line up in 4th position, Josh Data in 5th, Jamie King in 6th position, Paul Nichols in 7th, Ryan Grant in 8th, Nick Bennett in 9th, and Andy Whedon rounding out the top 10 riders further down the order. Well, William Birkin set a 1:25 earlier on, which was the best he could manage in that first qualifying session. He's gone superior to that with a 1 minute 12.7 in Q2, so that will enable him to improve, but it's not enough for him to improve his grid position, because the poorest time of the top 14 earlier on in Q1 was a 1 minute 3.7, and Brandon Payne was the only rider in Q2 to go faster than a 1 minute 3.7. So aside from William and Matt Birkin, all of the riders will be taking their Q1 times, and that means that the top 14 positions will have been determined by Q1. So rounding out those grid positions, Chris Yeomans, Ross Michael 11th and 12th, Felix Hearn, Joe Dempsey, and then of course, as I said, William Birkin with that improved time in Q2, and Matt Birkin will also improve his fortune. So those are the only 2 riders to make an impact on their times. Matt Birkin going above William Birkin, but that's the only impact of Q2 in the senior mini motos, where otherwise there's no change compared to that first qualifying session. We continue on with qualifying 2, and it's the Mini F1 sidecars who are next out. The so far unbeaten number 26 outfit, ridden by Mick Williams, was comfortably fastest in Q1. Now the times in first qualifying were around the 58 second mark for Mick Williams. For the rest of the pack, nobody else was able to break the 1 minute barrier. And as per the 2 previous sessions that we've just seen live, it's unlikely that the riders are going to be able to make an impact on their earlier times and make an improvement on their position on the grid. We'll see if that proves to be the case. Lunch break coming up next. That gives us 50 or so minutes that, if the weather does remain clear, could enable the track to improve slightly, and then we'll start to get on to the categories that actually were out on the circuit for Q1 in the middle of that rain shower, and those riders certainly will be able to improve in their second qualifying session. So Q2 is definitely going to improve in terms of levels of tension and in terms of the opportunities for riders to improve their position on the grid. But at the moment, these riders running about 8 or 9 seconds a lap off their fastest times from earlier on here today. Mick Williams set a 1 minute 8.8 on his first lap out. Now that's effectively a slower lap. So there is certainly room for improvement there, as he actually proves me right by flashing over the line in a 1 minute 6.5. But he won't be able to go significantly faster than that to improve on his time of a 58 flat, which he set in Q1. So again, it looks as though we're going to be in the positions as we were after Q1. That interesting battle in terms of the Mini F1 sidecars in 2017. At the moment, second and third positions have been the most hotly contested. Paul Coulter's number 25 outfit sits in second in the standings, but only narrowly ahead of Danny Stainer's number 17 outfit. And Stainer in the second race at round 2 at Red Lodge was able to beat Paul Coulters, which was for the second time in this 2017 season, having beaten him in the third race at the opening round in Llandau. And they were separated by 5 points at round number 1. They were separated by 7 points at round number 2, and that's what constitutes the 12-point deficit between Paul Coulter's number 25 outfit and Danny Stainer on the number 17 machine. Stainer at the moment sitting in second position in Q1, and Paul Coulters in third in Q1, 1 minute 1 and 1 minute 2 respectively. So Stainer set to start ahead of Coulters on the grid. Otherwise, the top 3 positions in the championship are also the top three outfits lining up on the grid as it stands, certainly in the Mini F1 sidecars. But I insist that it's highly unlikely that things are going to change here in Q2, with, as I said, the outfits running at the moment 7 or 8 seconds a lap off their times from Q1. Mick Williams at the moment leading the second qualifying session. The advantage that this session does have for teams or for riders, depending on the respective categories, is it gives them some opportunity to have some wet running. Those who escaped that rain shower earlier on today have certainly set the times that are going to take them forward onto the grid. But unless things change massively here this afternoon, it will be at very least a damp start, and the grey clouds that are overhead suggest that there is more potential for further rain here this afternoon. If that does come, then this opportunity to go out when it is still slippery will be some important practice, effectively, because although this is a qualifying session, the times are unlikely to make too much of an impact on what the riders did this morning in Q1. Mick Williams, the fastest in Q1 with a 58-second lap, and it's 1 minute 6, the fastest in Q2. Some of the riders easing off and easing their way back to the pits, knowing that they're not going to be able to improve and probably not too keen to risk the machines themselves in slippery conditions, and with a passenger on the side of the machine. Mini F1 sidecars always one of the most challenging categories in which to participate, with 2 members of the team needed to pilot their machine. And it's Mick Williams who's done it best so far in 2017, but his gap in the wet session hasn't been nearly as significant as his advantage in the dry session. So you wonder whether he's taking it a little bit easy in the wet in Q2, or whether it's just the case that the other outfits are more adept in wet conditions. And well, that certainly could bring the grid a little bit closer together than we've seen so far this season, because Mick Williams has regularly run a couple of seconds a lap faster than everyone else in these Mini F1 sidecars. More outfits making their way back up here as it is towards the paddock. It's a very unusual situation where the circuit is carved into the landscape, and it's very attractive surroundings here at Rowrah for those of you listening in at home who may not necessarily have been here before, as Danny Stainer's number 17 outfit gets a bit of a slide on through the chicane and round towards the completion of another lap. So none of the outfits able to improve in this Q2 session, and they are starting to trickle their way now up towards the pit lane. Of course, there is still more time left in this session, but none of them seem too keen to use it to the maximum extent, which follows the trend that we've seen at the opening 2 rounds as well, where the Mini F1 sidecars tend to do a shorter amount of running just to make sure that everything is working in peak condition, and then make their way back to the paddock. And the most that anyone has done so far in this second qualifying session has been 5 laps, which already is more running than we saw in Q1. Than not all of the teams, not all the outfits running to the end of that session either. So Mick Williams then on the number 26 outfit will start on pole. Danny Stainer's number 17 outfit that sits currently 3rd in the championship. That's where the main fight is. Second position is Paul Quarters on the number 25. He'll start 3rd on the grid for each of the 3 races, so he immediately has some work to do here today to try and maintain that 12-point championship lead. And then there's a separate battle in the series standings overall over P4, with Mark Parker's outfit leading that battle through sheer consistency and having taken part at both of the opening 2 rounds of the season. Adrian Ems on the number 76 missed round number 2. Back today though, and will line up 6th on the grid. So at the back of that 3rd row on the grid, behind the number 144 Mick Lee, and Simon Ibbotson will sit on the 2nd row alongside Paul Quarters. And Ibbotson down in 8th in the standings at the moment, as we see a slide off on the exit of the chicane as another lashing of rain starts to come down here in Rowrah. So just as I was saying that after the lunch break there might be a few teams and a few riders hoping to improve their fortunes, that's going to be increasingly difficult if the rain continues to come down with this intensity. We are once again in an intensive rain shower,
And that's the last of the sidecar outfits giving up on this session, really, as they've had to make their way out from a decidedly sloppy-looking gravel and grass area off the circuit, and puddles starting to develop off-track. So when runners and riders do exit the circuit, it makes it pretty tricky just to get back onto the track. And actually, the winds are howling now to such an extent that this rain is coming down at a near 30-degree angle, and the wind actually seems to be picking it up and blowing it around all over the place. It's quite impressive for those of you who aren't trackside and listening in at home. Of course, a reminder that you can be listening in on the Cool FAB-Racing website, coolfabracing.com, and we also remind you to send us messages through Facebook and Twitter just to keep us up to date with perhaps how you're sheltering yourself from the rain at the moment if you're trackside, or how you're enjoying a nice warm cup of tea sat next to the radiator if you're listening in from at home. This has been myself, Alex Raby, sitting in front of a radiator up here in our commentary position, so no complaints from me, but I am now going to go down to the paddock, brave the elements, rejoin us after the break. We'll be getting back underway at about 1:45 with Q2 in the sessions in the remainder of Q.